Hey guys, welcome to Hip Hughes History. We're continuing the election series. This time we're going to hit you up with 1920 and see if we can't return to some normalcy. How about that? The Republicans are putting up Warren G. Harding. The Democrats got James Cox. Let's go to the videotape. Ouchie mama, this is a drubbling, guys. If you take a look at the electoral map, you can see that James Cox, the challenger, is only getting states down in the Deep South. This is still the solid South. He's even losing Tennessee, the first time since Reconstruction that a southern state is going to vote for the Republicans. We're talking about a 404 electoral victory over only 127 electoral votes for James Cox. William G. Harding is going to ride this baby hardcore. 60% of the popular vote to only 34% of the popular vote for Mr. Cox, and that's like a 16 million to 9 million difference. And even though the women vote went up, and last election women voted progressive, the women vote is going to increase the total vote from about 16 million to about 28 million people this election, but they're going to be voting for Mr. Harding. So it is a walloping, guys. Historical context means a lot in this election. So before we even look at the candidates, let's kind of set the stage. So 1919 is quite the year, guys. Not only do we have the end of World War I and kind of America in turmoil trying to figure out whether we're going to join the League of Nations and the Treaty of Versailles going on and the 14 points, and there's a lot of animosity in the United States against this concept of kind of hooking our, hook into the sails of a European ship. So there's a lot of isolationism kind of going on. And we've also had humongous turmoil domestically with the Red Scare going on in the United States. There were anarchist bombs that were sent to dignitaries. There was a fear there was going to be an attack on Wall Street. You have the Russian Revolution that's going on. You have race riots that are rocking the United States, including the biggest one in 1919 in Chicago, where the whole city erupted and there's white vigilante justice going on and burning down black parts of towns. It is an ugly scene. There is a lot of chaos, and really we're looking at a feeling of anti-progressivism, that in a sense we need to go back to our conservative roots, and all of this cray-cray business needs just to go away. Not to mention, you also have the Irish Revolution going on at the same time. There's not enough. You ever play whack-a-mole? That's kind of what it's like. It's whack-a-mole. There's just all these little gremlins popping up all over the place, and the United States is in a dizzy, and we're having a presidential election. So let's see if we can't frame out the candidates, talk a little bit about how they ran their campaigns, what issues were important, and why Mr. Harding is going to kick Mr. Cox's you-know-what. So Warren G. Harding is the kind of consummate politician. He is going to really be one of the first real party candidates that's kind of nominated and elected in that process of becoming the presidential nominee through kind of these cigar, smoke-filled political rooms in the back corner somewhere. A lot of people thought Teddy was going to be the man. Teddy Roosevelt was going to seek the nomination. He was going to come back from the 1916 lost election, and he was going to reclaim kind of the progressive mantle. Most progressives at this time are in the Republican Party. The Democratic Party, even though there's some northern progressives in cities and such, is still seen as kind of this southern states' rights, racist party from the Deep South. But Teddy goes down in 1919, he dies, and the Republican Party is now in a fizzle of what to do. And there were numerous people that ran for that nomination, but Harding's political campaign was smart enough to understand that this was going to be controlled by the party bosses, and Harding gets in. And Harding runs a different kind of campaign. His theme is a return to normalcy. He's not going to campaign vigorously across the United States. He's going to sit like William McKinley did in Ohio on his porch and have people come to him. And really, this is going to be a political campaign, not only with mailings and postcards, but now we have phone calls and silent films, and we have reels and sound, and he's going to use the media to get out that message of America first, of a return to normalcy. He waffled on the war issue a lot in terms of whether or not we should join the League of Nations. He didn't want to take a stand. He didn't want to alienate Germans. He didn't want to alienate the Irish. He wanted to make sure that he got elected. So he kind kind of kept mum, and he ran against Woodrow Wilson. That's what he did, that we needed to go back to the days where it wasn't so crazy, and that he was the man to do it. His vice presidential nominee is Calvin Coolidge, who was the Massachusetts governor who cracked down when there was strikes going on. He's kind of the law and order candidate. So the two big issues for these guys, forget the war, forget the economy a lot, we're going to talk about a return to normalcy, and we're going to talk about law and order. And that's going to resonate across the United States. So let's look at Mr. Cox. Like Mr. Harding, Mr. Cox is also from Ohio. He's also a newspaper publisher. Mr. Harding was a newspaper publisher as well before he went into the Senate. He was a senator. Mr. Cox was a House member. He was the governor of Ohio. He was seen as a moderate, but somebody who could do some progressive reforms. But economically, he's much more conservative than, let's say, William Jennings Bryan or some of the other progressive candidates that the Democrats had offered up before. So he's going to do his best to deal with this Wilson problem. Wilson, even though he said he wasn't going to run for a third term, he had hopes that the convention would fall apart and they would come back to him and Woodrow Wilson would run for a third term. But he was quite sick. He had a stroke in 1919. He couldn't communicate. And that was part of the problem. He couldn't communicate his foreign policy vision, that, you know, this was the worst of wars and we're going to be a leader in the world now, and part of that is this League of Nations. He couldn't communicate that. And he has a huge ethnic problem, not only with Germans. There's a huge anti-German kind of fever sweeping the country in World War I. When Cox was governor of Ohio, he banned the teaching of the German language. So Germans, which for the most part were populists and were voting Democrat in many of these elections, they're going to stay home. And that's going to allow Mr. Harding to sweep the Midwest. Those German communities, they're just not going to vote for the Democratic Party, who was the party that fought, you know, against the German civilization. And you also have this Irish problem. A lot of Irish are living in cities in the Northeast, Chicago, Boston, New York, and the Irish War of Independence was going on. And, you know, Wilson is siding with Britain, our ally in World War I. The Irish Republic in America had raised something like $8 million. They spent $500,000 on that campaign on the side of Mr. Harding. Mr. Harding had a 4-to-1 war chest advantage over Mr. Cox. So really, Cox, even though he has FDR is going to be a future president, they're really not able to take a clear stand on what their foreign policy is, which leaves them in a dizzy. And people are tired of progressivism, and even though they aren't strong progressives at that point, they're really not going to be able to do anything to move the ball. He tried his best, he campaigned really hard, but the country and the historical context that was going on at that time really kind of paved the path for Mr. Harding to become president, and to do it in a huge way. And of course, Mr. Harding, he's going to pass away a few years later. Maybe we'll do another video on Mr. Harding and his mistresses and the claim of black blood, and there's really great stories about Mr. Harding, who's been ranked as maybe not one of the best presidents. We'll talk about that another day. So we're going back and we're going to return to normalcy, guys. We're going to have a decade of the 1920s of Republican presidents. I'm so excited to do the next election in 1924 real soon. But until then, we're going to ask you to subscribe, hit that big red button up there, and zip through the lands of the internet to subscribe to Hip Use History for free and funky and fun lectures. How about that? And if you haven't checked out the election playlist, we've done 18 or 19 at this point. You can click that button right there and go find your favorite election and grow your brain 10 times its size. So there you go, guys. I always say it, giddy up for the learning, and always remember, where your attention goes, your energy flows.